everyone, and welcome to CoMotion Labs. My name is Suni, and I'm the manager of this floor. CoMotion Labs is a multi-industry incubator that hosts high-tech startups, both inside the UW community and to the greater Seattle area. We have 3 different buildings that encompass the greater Seattle area, or the greater UW the greater UW campus, rather. This is our first building. This building in the back is home to 24 different startups that are working on different solutions for augmented and virtual reality. Our second building, our lab in Startup Hall, hosts startups that are in IT and software, and they're also home to Bunker Labs as well as the Techstars cohort. And our third building is Fluke Hall that incubates life sciences, engineering, and medical startups. And they also are home to our makerspace, which has just become open to the public. We also recently launched a 4th location in Spokane that is our virtual location. I'm pleased to welcome you all to our second installation of our 5-part blockchain basics series. Our goal for this series is to provide sessions that approach the technology in an accessible way. Our next series is going to be next Tuesday on March 27th, and that's going to be entitled Crypto Millionaires, Angel Investing, and the Path for Diversification, with speakers Corey Huang, Casey Moore, and Pat Larson. Many thanks to our sponsors, the Seattle Angel Conference, for collaborating with us on this event, as well as our other sponsors, the Seattle Angel Fund and the Seattle Entrepreneurship Club. I'm thrilled to introduce our speakers for this event. We have Rahul Sood, Amy Pettigrew, Nico Cordeiro, and then our moderator, John Sechrest.
I'm mic'd, thanks.
Okay, great. Okay, cool.
So thanks for coming. I run the Seattle Angel Conference as well as run the Lean Startup Seattle and the Seattle Startup Open Coffees with the effort of trying to get more startups to be more effective, get more people to write checks on one side, get more startups to be effective by doing customer development early. We see at all of those some kind of bubbling around blockchain, but we also see a lot of people who don't necessarily understand that. So what I'd like to do is to have our guests introduce themselves, and then we'll go through a discussion about the different aspects that are sort of showing up in the process of doing that. So Rahul, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Rahul Sood, and I'm the founder of Unikrn. We are a global esports company built on the most cutting-edge blockchain and gaming technologies. I started Unikrn in 2014. Prior to that, I was with Microsoft. I actually started Microsoft Ventures, and prior to that, I was in gaming. I had a gaming company that I started many years ago. It sold to HP, and we used to build PCs just to play video games on. So,
I'm Amy Eskridge Pettigrew, and I'm CTO of UNISPARC. UNISPARC is a blockchain company focused on servicing the utility industry. We're looking at taking existing utility infrastructure and repurposing it for new services in the energy space. So, yeah.
I'm Nico Cordeiro. I am the principal analyst at Strix Leviathan. We are building an automated trading platform and data ingestion engine for institutional investors looking to get into the crypto asset space. Prior to that, I was over at PitchBook doing research on private equity, venture capital, and crypto assets.
Yeah, so I'm particularly intrigued about the different ways I can look at something. So I have blockchain or hashgraph or some mechanism for a distributed ledger, and then I use it for doing something like I want to bet on esports, and so I do some kind of token offering. You've done a couple of token offerings, and they have slightly different slices. Could you dive into that for a moment?
Sure. So Unikrn's a highly regulated business. We're in a highly regulated industry. One of the challenges that we have, first, I just want to talk about why we went on blockchain in the first place. A couple years ago, we were dealing with trying to expand across Europe. And, you know, we're licensed currently at that time, we're licensed in Australia and the Isle of Man, and we were just about to get our license in Malta. And going across Europe as a betting operator is very difficult, being that you have to deal with banks, and traditional banking is hard. It's hard dealing with multiple currencies. It's hard dealing with different types of banking regulations across borders. getting on blockchain had nothing to do with skirting regulation. It had everything to do with disrupting the banking business for us. So Mark Cuban, who's one of our investors, really pushed us to get on blockchain and start looking at it a couple of years ago. And we realized that if you're doing anything that requires high trust and transparency, that blockchain is really a great way to do it, especially in our business where customers care about their transaction history, all the detail, in terms of how much they've bet, what they've won and lost and things like that. And having it on the blockchain is really good. So at the same time, we had customers in the US and Korea, mostly the US and Korea, but other markets as well, that wanted to play on our platform but couldn't because we're a betting operator. So you can't bet legally with fiat currency or any currency for that matter anywhere that's not regulated, or we're not regulated or licensed. So we created something called the Unicoin. And the Unicoin it's a free token. It's a free token that people earn. They connect their gaming accounts to our platform, their Riot account, their Steam account. They play video games. They earn the tokens. And they can use it on our platform in a gamified way. They're non-transferable. They can't be sold or bought. They can be used in jackpots and raffles for prizes. And basically, they level up. It's sort of like a gamified way of playing on our platform. And last year, we then took Unicoin, we called it Unicoin Silver, and we created Unicoin Gold, which is our ERC20 token. And we did that because customers kept asking.
What's ERC20 for people here?
Sorry. ERC20 is Ethereum. It's built on the Ethereum platform. It's a cryptocurrency or a crypto token. We built that because our customers were asking for more usage on our platform. So they wanted to find new ways of using the token. So the first thing we did was we polled our customers and we asked them, how many of you have bought or sold Bitcoin? How many of you are familiar with crypto wallets? We asked questions like that were really general. And we were surprised to find that over 70% of our customers actually played with crypto or were interested in it. I guess it's because we're in a younger demographic or something. So we created Unicoin Gold. We had a token sale, and we sold about 127 million tokens, mostly to customers, which is kind of unique. We collected around 112,000 Ethereum, which has, it's been as high as over $100 million to what it is today, something like 60 million or something like that. It's crazy, this industry, but that's sort of.
Now you used the word token sale, not ICO.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Look,
I'm not sure that everybody agrees with that.
Well, look, let me put it this way. The SEC isn't going to care if you're saying it's a token sale or an ICO. They're going to look at your token and see if it's a utility, if it's true utility, or if it's a security, and that's what they care about.
So we have security, we have utility, and we have currency, right? So Amy, you're working on this question of utility, but in a completely different context, right? So you're suggesting, why don't you drive into what UNISPARC does?
Yeah, so I'm really interested in the idea of asset-backed tokens, having a token that actually represents a real physical, real-world value. And so it might be useful to go into the difference between a coin and a token.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of hierarchies. It starts at what is a blockchain? The blockchain is the distributed ledger. And you have the Bitcoin protocol is the set of instructions that determines how that blockchain operates. And then on top of that, you have another layer, which is the coin. The protocol describes how the coin is going to work, how it gets traded and transacted, how it gets authenticated, and all those things. And then on top of the coin, you can have a token. And a token is defined by the smart contracts on a network like Ethereum, where you have smart contracts where you can have a set of rules that define how your token is exchanged. So there's three different hierarchies. It's protocol and then coin and then token.
Unicoin Silver is a...
Unicoin Silver is an internal token. It's not a crypto at all. So it's off blockchain.
Off blockchain. And a Unicoin Gold is
a crypto token.
On top of Ethereum, so it has a smart contract, so it's a token that represents some kind of behavior with a smart contract.
Correct. It's effectively a utility token that can be used on the Unikrn platform in various ways, not just for wagering, but lots of other ways. So.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think when you say utility token, you're referring to, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're referring to the fact that the token has a usage other than just being a store of value.
Correct. So we, we're pretty insistent that when we did our token sale, that customers should buy it if they are interested in esports and using our platform. It's hard to avoid speculators, but you have to be clear that these are not investments. Like you're not buying a token to invest in it because you can't. You're not getting equity. You're not getting any voting rights. You have no say over what we do in our company. So these tokens are not tied to any type of security.
So there's where the ICO and the token are different, right? If I'm doing a token and I use the token, it's a utility thing. And if I do an ICO and I get rights to a company, then that's the ICO thing. Makes it a security thing, right?
Well, let me just say this. Last year, last year was the year of the ICO or the token sale. There was a bunch of them that went out. There's probably something like 1,700 coins out right now. Most of them are garbage, like really. Like
99%
99% are garbage with absolutely no usage. And most of them are securities because they were sold as, with an expectation of profit. They were sold with no working platform. They were sold as a way to raise money for a particular project. They were sold as securities and they didn't even know they were securities. So whether you call it an ICO or a token sale doesn't matter. It's what your intent was when you actually created the token and did the sale.
Right. So I don't think we're done with Amy yet. So what are you doing with your utility stuff?
Yeah, so we're taking physical assets in the utility industry, the infrastructure of the utility industry, and we're tokenizing that.
Like I'm a power plant and I produce carbon and I throw a token on top of the carbon and sell it.
Yeah, that's a good example.
This ton of carbon has value, and I have a place where I can sell it on an exchange.
There's a variety of applications that you can imagine that play into things that the utility industry already does. They're just not doing it in a tokenized, easily transactable way. So,
so again, you're looking at the same thing that Rahul is, which is you disrupt the process and create value in improving the process with your tokens.
Yes, we're not creating a new blockchain. We're doing an application-based project.
Right. So you're not looking at any of this as a utility. You're looking at currencies and assets.
No, that's not entirely correct. We're looking at utilities as well. Completely agree with what Rahul said in terms of utility vote tokens. The way that we look at them is that they have a specific use for a specific product or service that is built into that smart contract. If it doesn't have any other use outside of that, then it's a utility. Where I disagree with Rahul is that some of these utility tokens will have value because they have utility, right? People want to operate on Unikrn, so they have an inherent value. I think what people are betting on today is that the inherent value in a lot of utility tokens will be a lot higher as the industry evolves, as user interfaces become more usable, as more people get brought onto the blockchain. I think that's the big bet going there. In terms of the other assets, agree with those as well. You have your currencies, your assets, and your utility tokens.
So Strix Leviathan is building a platform to trade tokens.
Correct. Looking at institutional investors who want to bring a lot more money into the space that is currently allowed for their current infrastructure. Right now, if you want to move just a couple $1 million on GDAX, which is one of the highest volume exchanges, you're going to enter a lot of slippage. You're going to you're basically going to make the market and move the price beyond where you wanted to enter the market. So that's what we're working on.
So I have $100 million in my private equity fund. I'd like to deploy it into crypto. I don't really want to think too hard about crypto, so I buy your platform and hit the little go button.
Well, I hope nobody with $100 million is thinking like that, but I hope they understand what they're buying. But yeah, exactly. Like if you want to put $100 million into cryptos, right now the infrastructure isn't there for you to deploy that in an efficient way, and we're trying to build that infrastructure.
So would you see that Unicoin Gold would be a useful thing on your platform, and how would that work?
Yeah, so it would depend on, if an investor out there believes that the utility value of Unikrn is not properly represented in the price today, then yes, there would be an opportunity for them to move in there, buy up Unikrn, and hold it until it reaches the utility value that they think it's actually worth.
And so if I corner the market on silver, or in this case, Unicoin Gold, then I could actually drive the price of that up.
Correct. I mean, we do see a lot of that, especially in the lower liquid markets where there's not a lot of liquidity. I mean, I'm sure many of you have heard about the pump and dump groups. A lot of them, they'll target tokens with such low liquidity that with just 50 grand, they can drive that price up, and then they exit and destroy the token essentially. So that is possible, and that's something you need to be looking out for if you're involved in that space.
So we have currency, utility, and security. And so if I'm doing anything that's a security, then I have to follow an SEC rule of some kind, right? So are there any security pathways that make a difference that would make it easy to offer a compliant ICO?
Sure. I think one example, an organization out there called Templum, they're building an alternative trading system. What they're doing is really interesting. They're focusing on tokenized securities. So they're actually going after that market. Nothing has been set in stone with the SEC for anybody operating over there. But as an example, I believe it's Blockchain Capital. They did their latest VC fund raise through a tokenization on the platform. So the LPA agreement is built into the smart contract. They sell the token. That's how they raise their money for their VC fund. And now these limited partners have liquidity where they can trade in and out of that position as opposed to being locked up for 10 years in a traditional VC fund.
So Amy, you're thinking about doing an ICO as part of your efforts. Mm-hmm. And so what are the factors that are coming for you in terms of being compliant?
Yeah, so I think when we talk about security tokens and SEC compliance, it's useful to bring up the Howey test. So the Howey test is...
How do you spell Howey?
It's Howey, Howey. And this comes from the Security Exchange Act of 1933, I think. And so a security is defined by the SEC as being an investment of money, a common enterprise. The third one is
Expectation of profit.
expectation of profit, and the fourth one is that it's based on the efforts of others other than yourself.
Right.
So when you're looking at SEC compliance, you need to determine whether your token or your coin is a security or not. Now, there's a lot of ICOs who have been sort of avoiding the fact that they really are securities, and they present themselves as utilities when really they're securities. And then there's also a handful of ICOs that have been trying to go the SEC compliant route, making an ICO that is Reg D compliant. An example of that is Republic.co. They have a DPA token. DPA is debt payable by asset. So they actually have a token that is SEC compliant that allows you to say this is a security. They embrace the fact that it's a security, and then they make it compliant that way.
So aren't they the people that do the PICO, the private ICO?
Yes, yes.
And so their model is, I get a bunch of angel investors, qualified, accredited investors. They buy into the token. Before it's a utility, they provide enough money so that it can become useful, and now they can then make a public offering of a utility token. So they see a two-stage mechanism for getting wide deployment. So
That's right.
We keep talking about this utility thing. When you're talking about utility, you said have something working. What are you trying? There's a line you're naming.
Okay, well, let me put it this way. The future of this space is likely, I don't know that there's anything there's anything like a SEC compliant token yet, because the SEC really hasn't come out and said this is how you be compliant. They've sort of given guidelines, but they haven't really come out and made a firm position. So what's happening is the industry is going out and saying, okay, let's try and tokenize securities. Let's build a regulated process. Let's put in just call it what it is, and let's work with exchanges who are also working with the SEC to become SEC compliant exchanges, that sort of thing. For us, I mean, it's really simple. We've got over 2 years of usage with the Unicoin. We have customers all around the world that are using this on a regular basis on our platform. They're putting in tens of thousands of coins on raffles and jackpots, and they're play betting in certain markets or global markets with the Unicoin Silver, and they'll soon be able to bet with Unicoin Gold. They're earning it every day by playing games, and we run tournaments online all the time. We also run tournaments at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. we create unique content, sort of like ESPN would for esports.
So can they extract the value out of this coin? So I put my money in by playing, and now I've got 10,000 Unicoin golds. Can I turn that to cash?
They can only do that with Unicoin Gold, but not silver. And the only way they can do it is if they take it off. We created our own internal blockchain. The reason we did that is, how many of you have played with blockchain and traded currencies? Okay, so you know how slow it can be. It can be painfully slow. And imagine if you're watching a game. Let's say you're watching an NFL game, for example, but in this case it's League of Legends, and you want to place micro bets like, is Russell Wilson going to fumble the ball, or is he going to throw an interception, or that sort of thing. You want to place it live in game. You can't wait 10, 15 minutes for that transaction. So we created something called Unikrn Wallet, which is an internal blockchain, and it allows for hundreds of transactions within seconds, and there's no gas fees, no transaction fees. So people...
Because you did that all internally on your own servers.
Right. So people come on our platform, they take their Unicoins off of the public blockchain, they put it on the internal blockchain, on the Unikrn wallet, and they still are the custodians of their coins because they hold the private key. We have no idea what the private key is. They hold their private key. If they lose their private key, the coins are lost, which is unfortunate. But that's how it works. And so they can remove the coins off the platform, then go to an exchange like Bittrex and sell them for Bitcoin or something, and then trade that for cash.
Yeah. So you mentioned something about securitized tokens and exchanges. Do you have any names for those?
Sorry, securitized.
So if I have a security...
You mean a security exchange?
Yeah.
There isn't any yet. There are big exchanges that are working to become security exchanges, but there really isn't any approved exchange yet.
In the United States?
In the United States, now, or anywhere.
Actually,
for that.
Funderbeam in Estonia is one.
Okay, that's interesting. Good to know. But I will say, the one government that I find is, well, there's two governments really that are sort of on the bleeding edge of this. Switzerland is great because they've already sort of defined what the different types of tokens are. Hopefully other governments follow. Malta is also really bullish on this space, and they're going to be coming up with, forward thinking around crypto. They just gave us a license. We're working in their sandbox to develop legal crypto betting across Europe. We'll be the first company in Europe to be able to do this legally, and we're helping to kind of shape that. They're very forward thinking. They totally get it.
So when we need to sign a contract, it's important to be able to uniquely identify the other person. So in my mind, there's some place where I have this sort of virtual crypto world, which you can be 100% anonymous on, and then all the drug dealers do all of their stuff and all of that conversation. And then somehow you have to tie it to a real person, which gets you into digital identity. Are you finding any need, like I want to sign a contract. I don't sign a contract by giving you a Bitcoin. I sign a contract by using a digital ID. Are you engaged in digital IDs at all with Unikrn?
100%. So we had to build an entire token selling platform that had full KYC, full AML. So KYC is know your customer. AML is anti-money laundering systems. We had to be able to verify the individual, so verify that they are an individual, verify that they are legally allowed in a state or in a country to be able to be on our platform. And then we had anti-sanction bouncing. My God, man, being in the U.S. is not easy. So, we had to bounce countries and individuals. We had a list of individuals that are sanctioned and countries that are sanctioned, and we were bouncing people left and right. And the thing is, most token sales don't do that. Most of them have an anonymous Ethereum wallet. You deposit Ethereum in it or Bitcoin in it, and it shoots you back tokens no matter who you are. No bank is going to touch you if you don't know who the customers are that are purchasing your tokens. So you have to do this stuff. So we built it fully compliant from the ground up, which is why the MGA in Malta is supporting us, and which is why other blockchain banks and that sort of thing are coming to us now saying, can we license your platform? So we're looking at that.
Cool. Yeah. Nowhere in there did you mention Estonia, so I'm curious. Did you use their digital ID, or did you use something like that? So you built your own from scratch?
We built our own from scratch.
Okay. So we have companies here that do digital ID work. Talk to any of them?
Where?
DocuSign tries to do that.
I mean, there's a lot of companies that are trying to do it. And last year when we were doing this, nobody in the crypto space was doing this. Nobody in blockchain was actually, people were thinking about it and how to apply it, but we had to mad rush and develop it and get it off the ground. So we just had no choice.
Right.
Yeah.
So
and we do use third parties for things like, verifying accredited investors and stuff like that. We did that.
Who did you use for that?
Verify Investor. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So how many people in the room know what an accredited investor is? So like a third of you. So let's go into that for a second. In the United States, if you buy securities, you have to be accredited. Sorry, if you buy securities, they have to be registered, except if you're accredited, you can buy unregistered securities. Accredited is you're a millionaire, not counting your house, 200K in income last year, this year, and next year, or 300K last year, this year, and next year with your spouse. So about 10% of Seattle is accredited. And if you get to the 45 to 65-year-old range, 15% of them in Seattle are accredited. So when you do a Reg D compliant thing or you do an accredited compliant thing, you're basically aiming at that specific market. People that are wealthy enough to make a mistake and only complain and not die. Yeah?
Right.
Okay. So in this process of building this ID system and then going through this compliance process, have you found that there's locations that are better to be engaged with than others?
For us?
Yeah.
Well, our hottest markets are basically across Europe, like Germany. United States is pretty popular. Korea is nuts. They love our platform, and what's amazing about Korea is that the volume of just trading that happens there, and also the volume on our platform is so it's so disproportionate to the size of the country. I don't even get it. We have communities in different places. So we have a community on WeChat for China. We have a community on KakaoTalk for Korea. We have a community, on Discord for other places. The KakaoTalk chat is always interesting because I go in there, I don't know what the hell they're saying. But
it's all in Korean.
It's all in Korean, but it's also in emojis. So I can always tell if they're happy or sad based on, like, if there's a bee slamming the ground or bashing his face, that sort of thing, then you know they're mad. But if they're happy, there's like a bear dancing. And so every now and then I'll go in and I'll post something in English, like a news update on what we're doing, and I'll see, like, dancing bees, and I like that. And that's typically what I do. So I post something, I post an emoji, and I walk. And then I just let the conversation go. And it's pretty neat. Like, it's and so what's crazy about it is we haven't even localized our platform for Koreans yet. We haven't localized for any language other than English. It's so stupid. As a company with, that we're at right now, we really should be localizing.
Right.
So we're trying to work on that.
Okay, so just to do an audience test, how many people have played on Unikrn? Almost no one. How many people have engaged in some kind of cryptocurrency transaction? Again, about a third. How many people have a wallet of any kind? Yeah, about the same group of people. So in terms of the utility work that you're doing, are you trying to be international with that, or are you staying in the U.S.?
Definitely starting in the U.S.
Yeah? And so the process of talking to utilities is one of those things that has a long sales cycle, right?
Yeah. So I have a partner who's been in the utility industry for a long time, so he's our CEO. And like you said, the sales cycle in that industry is, a lot of it is kind of like knowing people. So a lot of that will come into play. But it is a longer sales cycle than something like a consumer product.
So he's definitely B2C. Mm-hmm. He's B2B, but his B's are big B's, right? And so in the process of doing this, we have very different sales cycles, but we have an industry that's changing very rapidly, like month to month. It's a different world, right? The SEC has a brain fart and it goes one way. Somebody comes out and drops the price of Bitcoin in half. Mm-hmm. It's a very volatile market. So for each of you, how does that volatility affect your ability to be in business?
Volatility doesn't affect us because we don't pay attention to it. So
because you
because
have
we're
your
running
own
a
little
business.
specialized group.
Right.
Right.
And on top of that, we're more than just B2C. we actually have a pretty big B2B business, given that we license our odds and our platform to the largest betting operator in Australia. We're working with MGM Grand in the U.S. because we know that sports betting will be legal in the U.S. in coming months, and we're picking casinos to partner with to be able to enable that. So we're pretty broad in terms of our offering as well.
So you're selling data from your customer activity.
Right, but not the customer activity. We're not Facebook, but we actually sell. We actually create odds around one's chance of winning games, and we create really comprehensive live odds.
But
and
you get those odds from watching how people are engaging,
correct,
right?
Correct. So yes, we do that. So we watch teams. We're bookmakers. So we watch teams. We watch how they play. We create the odds, and then licensing data isn't a very exciting business. So what we're doing is we're creating a platform for crypto that's powered by Unikrn, where if you're a betting operator and you're licensed in Estonia or in Europe somewhere, and you want to take on esports, we'll create a full environment for you on esports. You just have to integrate Unikrn wallet, and you're good to go. So,
Cool.
Yeah.
So that'd be fast, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm really interested in this idea, like I said before, of the asset-backed cryptocurrency. And so in the energy industry, you're talking about real physical assets that are tokenized. And so that is sort of inherently designed to protect against a lot of that volatility in the current crypto market. So when you take a real asset and you tokenize that, you're going to have a minimum value that token is always going to be worth, because it shouldn't dip down below the actual value of the asset that it's backed by. Now that also means you're going to have a maximum threshold for the value of your token as well, because it can't be worth more than the asset that you're backing it with. But within that range, you have a inherent stability to protect against the volatility of something like Bitcoin or Ethereum, that's more of a trading marketplace, pump and dump kind of economy.
Yeah.
So I guess on two fronts. One, volatility is really good for investors. It's hard to make a lot of money when there's not a lot of volatility. So on that front, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I think the volatility is just representative of where we're at in the stage. Rahul mentioned it earlier. Like most of these companies, 99% of them he mentioned are crap and are going to fail. That's probably true because we're at the seed stage if we're looking at like a traditional business company. We have no idea what's going to succeed. We don't know how the industry is going to play out. We don't know, who's going to win, the one blockchain to rule them all in the end. And therefore, there's a lot of volatility. So I don't think it is a negative thing. It's just where we're at as an industry. It's very young. Nobody knows how things are going to play out. So emotion rules the day, and that's how the market works.
And so hedge fund type people like volatility. People that are utility type people hate volatility, and we get both in the same infrastructure.
Correct. And I think as more protocols get to the point where Unikrn is at, where like they actually have a product, they have customers, they're at the customer acquisition phase, you'll see that volatility on the utility side die down, right? I think the big thing right now, why you see such great volatility or high volatility in utility tokens is precisely because of what I mentioned previously, the seed stage nature. Nobody knows which one is going to win out, which one's going to deliver what they say they're going to deliver. So it just results in a crazy market.
So if you do the full path life cycle of Bitcoin, where do you think Bitcoin's value will be 10, 20, 30 years from now? Is it going to go like the stock market and get bigger and bigger, or is it going to go to zero or something in between?
Well, so my opinion is that when I look at the gold market, it's a $7 trillion market, right? And I don't know how many of you buy gold, but when you buy gold, you buy it with paper. You go to JP Morgan or whoever you broker with, Trade King or whatever, and you buy gold on paper. $7 trillion market is gold. Now imagine if everybody with paper gold says, hey, you know what? I feel like getting my gold today. So they're going to call it in and say, send me my bricks. There's no way in hell that's going to completely collapse the market. On top of that, the crypto market, the entire crypto market, which is led by Bitcoin and will probably, I believe, will always be led by Bitcoin, is worth something like 300 million, if that, like somewhere around there, depending on the day, but it's around $300 million. So put aside all the crap coins and just look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin is, you can you can see that it's a finite number of Bitcoins out there that you can track. You know, and it
will always be finite.
It'll always be finite. At the end of the day, you will see somewhere around 21 million Bitcoins. I think right now there's 16 million. I'm not exactly sure, but I think it's around 16 million Bitcoins in circulation. And you know, every time a new Bitcoin gets mined, it gets added to the pool. But everything is traceable, and Bitcoin has a half-life of forever. So the only way that, you know, Bitcoin gets lost is if somebody loses their wallet in a lake or something like that. So if you think about that,
or they forget their cryptocurrency token or
right,
key,
or they forget their key. So if you think about that, you've got a finite number of coins. You've got people that are willing to transact with them. The generation that we're dealing with, the younger generation, is very comfortable with it and not comfortable with gold. I mean, when you think about the fungibility of gold, it's, you know, the transportability, being able to transact with it, Bitcoin is way, way easier to transact with. So in my opinion, you know, Bitcoin is going way beyond 25,000. I think it'll go to 25,000 this year. And you know, in a few years, I'm one of the believers that it's just going to keep going up. But it doesn't mean you go throw your house on it, and it doesn't mean you go run out and put everything into Bitcoin. It just means you should probably own a little bit of it, I think. And by the way, in terms of volatility, the market is really led by Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin crashes, the rest of the tokens crash with it. And you know, it's really Bitcoin and Ethereum that are sort of the leaders. You know, there's more downward pressure on Ethereum when you have a bunch of scam coins built on Ethereum. That downward pressure will soon alleviate itself because there'll be less ability to create scams, and plus more people are getting smarter about ICOs that they're jumping into. So yeah.
So I kind of take the opposite stance. I am not a fan of the proof of work mechanism of Bitcoin. I think it's unnecessarily expensive computationally and in terms of money and energy. So I lean more towards Bitcoin proved the market, but it is not always going to be the market leader. It definitely created the market. It definitely has first mover's advantage. It has a lot of things in its favor, but I think a computationally less expensive coin, I think would be much more practical for the type of widespread adoption that we'll be seeing over the next 5 years or so.
Some form of proof of stake instead of proof of work.
Yeah, I lean more towards proof of stake.
Okay.
So it's really difficult to pinpoint exactly where Bitcoin is going to end up. I tend to agree with Rahul. I mean, if you follow these markets, Bitcoin, everything is just priced in Bitcoin. Like, Bitcoin is embedded in everything. And, you know, I don't need to repeat his argument on gold. I don't know where it ends up, and the reason being is that because it is so easy for a group of miners to hard fork off Bitcoin and create an instant competitor where everyone keeps their same exact balance. And if they solve some problem that the core Bitcoin developers can't solve, well, then you're going to see a max exodus out of Bitcoin. I believe, to that end, it's worthy to hold Bitcoin, because if you're holding it when the fork happens, then you'll hold whatever the new one is. I just don't know the exact price where the original Bitcoin ends up 5 years from now. I just don't know.
So we're about to the point where we could ask questions. How many people in the room have questions they'd like to ask? So I think what we would like to do is have you line up over there, and we'll take one of the mics and put it over there, and we'll go back and forth. So whoever's asking questions, Caroline will help you do it.
Thank you very much. It was very valuable. I have a quick question about the gold Unicoin. So let's say someone gained gold Unicoin and he wants to transfer for a physical asset. Actually, John asked that question as well, but I couldn't still quite understand. So when you turn into that gold Unicoin into an asset, you transfer it. How do you make sure that, I mean, it's so volatile. How do you control the volatility? Because that asset price keeps changing relative to the value of the Bitcoin.
Right. So that's sort of two questions, I
Yes.
think. You're asking, how do we control the volatility of Unicoin?
Yes.
Well, we don't really manipulate the volatility. What I will say is this, that so as a betting operator, we have to have a risk pool. Mm-hmm. So there's, say, 140 million Unicoins out in circulation right now. We have a risk pool of 150 million, where when people place a bet, they're betting against a house, and so what tends to happen if you're a good betting operator over time, the risk pool will grow and the public float will shrink, which means there's less coins in circulation in the public float. So every now and then, we will find ways to redistribute those tokens by letting people connect a new game to the platform and earn tokens back. We don't just give them away. We have applications where people can earn tokens and redeem tokens on jackpots and things like that, and take skins that they have and trade it in for tokens. So we find ways of bringing tokens back into the market. So that's sort of how we manage volatility. In terms of being able to trade assets, well, there are people who buy unicoins and use them on our platform, and who also trade them out for whatever they want to trade it out for. They're allowed to do that. They can just take it off the blockchain and go do whatever they want with it. So, yep.
Thanks for the discussion today. I'm curious, who are the people in the world who are comfortable with KYC and uploading their passport to a random website in some place in the world and not knowing what's happening next?
Who are you asking?
Anyone.
Well, I mean, look, in order for this space to be taken seriously, in order for mainstream consumers to get involved, the purpose of regulation is not to stifle innovation. The purpose of regulation is actually to protect consumers from things like BitConnect and USI Tech and every other scam out there that takes money away from retired people, right? Or young people who are living in countries where maybe they don't have access to information, and they're basically what John said earlier. They're throwing in all their coins and they die effectively because it's every last penny that they're gambling on this stuff. So, you have to have regulation, number one. And number two, you need legitimacy. So we need banks to support it. We need governments to support it. There are three big problems with crypto right now. One is, first of all, it's impossible to use, like for an everyday consumer, right? They really find it difficult, so we got to make it easier for them. Second thing is, governments need to embrace it. So governments need to say, okay, we get it. It's a real thing. Fiat currency is dead. There's no bigger Ponzi scheme than gold, right? We really need to embrace crypto and do it in a regulated way, and with KYC and AML, and avoid all the nefarious activity that happens with fiat, like drug dealing and things like that. This isn't just with crypto; it happens with the U.S. dollar every day. And then the last thing is, banks need to actually embrace it as well, and banks need to be able to let you bank your crypto. And I think those three things are being solved now, and they require people to upload their passports and things like that. So the old school anarchy crypto guy who says no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go and and do it all anonymously. Well, you're never going to see Bitcoin go to 25,000 and beyond if there's no regulation.
So the thing that ties the Bitcoin space to reality is some form of digital ID. And so you end up having some third party that says, yes, I've looked at the passport. Doesn't have to go through a website. Right. There's other mechanisms to do that.
How do you solve the identity theft problem, or the potential for identity theft, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, Amy, you should answer that with your story about what you did at the Startup Weekend.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I recently did a hackathon for a biotech blockchain group that was trying to explore crypto applications for biotech. And so my project for that was genomic authentication. Actually taking your private DNA sequence, so keeping it private and anonymized, but making a private key out of your genomic data. And
so
then
you spit into a
into a tube,
and then you shake it around, and then you get a digital key.
Yeah, you get a private key that's authenticated to you, but you can use your public key and it's not traceable to you. So it would be like a zero knowledge genomic authentication. So there's ideas about how you can handle identity and authentication. I don't think we're quite there yet. There's a lot of room for growth in the authentication and identity space. But on your point about KYCs, and is everyone going to want to fill out a KYC or a Know Your Customer form? I think to be Reg D SEC compliant, you only have to do a KYC for the initial purchasers, and they have to hold the token for 12 months, and then they can sell it to whoever they want to sell it to, and a KYC is no longer required after that 12-month period. So that does sort of provide a little cushion in that.
So I'm just wondering that, do we really need a token to build an application on the blockchain? Things in most of the cases, like crowdfunding, we don't really need a token for people to share the value. And what do you think is a better way to build an application for us? Like, do we build our own coin or a new blockchain, or we just build an application on Ethereum with Solidity?
Who are you asking?
You.
Rahul.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a great question. No, you don't need a coin. You have to have a real justification for a token economy to do it, and it shouldn't be, I want to raise money for my project. There's so many problems in the blockchain space that need solving where you can make real money from, like things like algorithmic trading, things like making it easy for customers with wallets, banking, identity, KYC, anything with trust and transparency like healthcare, commerce, stuff like that. There's a lot of problems that can be solved, and there's a lot of money to be made there, and you can build it on an existing platform like the Ethereum platform without having to tokenize it. And you can invite other tokens to participate potentially. The only reason you want to do a token is if there's a real justification to have it, and for us there is. I mean, it's very much a part of our business. So yeah.
Hey, I have a question that if there's a newly formed marketplace, if I want to do a marketplace, kind of startup business, what is your suggestion to enable in cryptocurrency trading on the, basically using that as a way to kind of pay the publisher and all that? What sort of things I need to watch out for? I don't know who's the expert.
Like a gaming marketplace?
No, like marketplace to trade some digital assets.
Okay.
So I have a bunch of songs, and I would like to distribute those songs between people, and I would like to keep track of that on a public ledger.
Keeping track, it's not,
You just want to track the transactions.
Just want to use that as one of the currency, like instead of USD, is it good idea to add this, but a little bit diluting, the core value of this marketplace, but, using this to asking the producer to, engage more on the platform early on to get my critical mass for my marketplace. So what's the suggestion on those?
So, well, you want us to answer?
Sure. If I understand you correctly, you're asking, what you need to look out for if you're creating a tokenized marketplace, essentially.
Yeah, but my marketplace is not just to trade token, but like doing something
I understand.
else.
Yeah,
just
totally.
Using
All right.
that as
I understand. I don't think any of us can give you like the super in-depth advice you're looking for, but just consider the participants. The nodes on your network, who's going to maintain the network, who's going to keep track of those transactions, how are they going to be rewarded, then your end user, what is it in it for them with the token, and then anybody else you're going to be using as a validator. I assume you'll need some type of validator who's going to ensure that what these objects or songs or whatever it is what it actually say it is. How are you going to, pay them for fulfilling that role? How is all that going to, how you're going to design the economic incentives so people who don't know each other, potentially thousands, millions of people, to act in a way that's beneficial to the network.
Right, so that would be the core business model that I'd be building, right? But my question is that, is it beneficial or is there like good to kind of introduce these kind of in cryptocurrency on the marketplace to gain the critical mass?
Yeah, so I would say it's absolutely beneficial. You should do it in a thematic way though. So you don't just want to take any token. If you're doing something in music, you probably want to deal with companies that are doing, arts and entertainment or, that sort of thing so they can bring their audiences to your platform. So for example, if you were in the gaming business and you're selling games, you would come to us and say, hey, can we accept Unicoin for games? And we'd say, absolutely, here's the wallet, go do it, and we'll send you, tens of thousands of customers who buy Unicoins to your platform. So that's how you should think about it.
I see. Thank you.
Hi, great presentation. I have kind of a simple question. I'm trying to explain to my dad, or I come from Michigan, a lot of blue-collar people, and I understand cryptocurrency, I do technology, but explaining it to them is hard for me. And I'm trying to imagine you guys having, like, Rahul, I can imagine, I could explain to my dad, you exchange the Unicoin, But say you're talking to 50-year-old guys from Michigan, and you say, hey, you're going to buy a Bitcoin, but you can't go into a store, give them a credit card. You can't with Ethereum. You can't, the liquidity of it. For them to get their mind around it, how would you explain it to someone to say, hey, yeah, you need to get involved with this, but...
I think, so in the case of tokens are more of they're not just a technological innovation, they're also a financial innovation. And so the older way of doing things in investing would be like you do, say you have a company that you want to fund. Traditionally, you would do a private placement where you would go to like Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley. You would have them do a traditional private placement where they would take your deal around and shop it around, and then you get a piece of paper that goes in a folder that goes under your desk for the next 5 or 6 or 7 years, and you don't really hear anything back from the, it's a very illiquid thing, right, yeah. Is my point. But if you tokenize it, it's not just a piece of paper sitting in a folder. It's something that is fungible, transactable. You can unload the asset if you need to and sell it and get out, or you can hold it and keep it longer. But it's really not just a technological innovation, it's also a financial business model innovation.
And it's important to recognize that there are Visa cards that are Bitcoin Visa cards, so you can actually go get it on a Visa card and use it.
None of them actually work because Visa or MasterCard hasn't embraced it yet. Right, so they're all essentially technology first.
It actually works in Europe, but nonetheless, there are ways to do this. There are consequences, and next time we're going to talk about the consequences of if I have a Visa card with Bitcoin and I buy a bunch of pizzas with it, and the price of Bitcoin is moving. What's the tax consequences of that? And we'll dive into that deep next time. But I think the thing to talk to your father or the blue-collar worker in Michigan about it is to think about the question of how do I represent a transaction in a way that everybody knows about it and we can lock it down for a single person, right? And so we have a public store that everybody's keeping instead of a centralized version of it that allows it to be transparent. And then all of the magic underneath you don't actually have to explain.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Hey, my name is Patrick, and I actually had a question for Amy. I agree with the backing up of the token with a utility, so I was curious if you could elaborate more on how you've gone through that and some pros and cons, and because you can get out of the range of the SEC and maybe into commodity trading there, and I was curious if you guys have had to deal with that and some pros and cons of that.
Yeah, so we're still early stage. We're still kind of locking down our IP, so we're not talking about the really, really specific details of the application yet. But just in general about like taking an asset, a utility asset, and tokenizing it, I think there's a lot of value there because, like I was saying earlier, I really favor the currencies that have real underlying value behind them, and so that's what we're trying to do. But some other examples of that would be like you could have a coin that's backed by intellectual property, where when you transact the coin, you get ownership of the intellectual property that's behind it. And with intellectual property, you could have data, right, could be that intellectual property. And utility data could be an example of that, where you have a coin that's represented by anonymized data sets. So that would be one example of tokenizing a utility infrastructure asset.
So we have a bunch of, we had an Element 8 meeting. Element 8 is the sort of clean tech angel group. And they had an attorney from K&L Gates there, and he gave a whole bunch of blockchain examples, 100% of which were tracking data in the energy economy and essentially managing the value of something. And so he gave dozens of examples which were exactly in that commodity futures market or enabled that possibility. So I would expect anything where you need to track the correctness of a transaction in public has an opportunity to be disrupted with this technology. So I would expect us to see huge transformations in the commodity market because of that. So I don't see any more people in line. Oh, here we go.
A few sitters here. Hey, really like the panel, and there's a lot of different diversity here when it comes to like the businesses that you guys are in, or the markets. I was just wondering, kind of following up with what John was saying, what are some of the things, like the last talk that was here last week was, very futuristic sounding and like, oh my gosh, this is going to change everything that we ever do. But what are some of the things that you see that are going to hit sooner for like the wide mainstream public?
Well, I could say in my area, I suppose. I think of the future of entertainment where, you walk into a warehouse and you strap on a vest that has haptic feedback and then a headband that has sensors in it. You carry around a fake weapon with articulating feedback, and you wear augmented reality glasses, and now they drop you into a real life game of Fortnite with your friends, where you run around and you're in a map that changes. And then on top of that, there's people watching and they're placing bets on the action. To me, that's kind of the future of sports and the future of entertainment, and I think that's where it's going.
And that's here all of those people, all those pieces exist today.
Exist today, exactly.
And so all that has to happen is someone decide to
put it together.
Bet.
Yep.
Okay.
Hey, thank you all. Maybe a question for
Amy had an answer too, or?
Yeah, so I was just going to say that blockchain seems kind of futuristic and like a totally new thing, but really it's an implementation of cryptographic protocols that have been around for a while. So the idea of a distributed database is not new. The idea of authenticating between transactions is not new. So I think you'll see industries, you were asking like the future direction of where blockchain will be adopted. I think those traditional industries that would already benefit from those things, like authentication and decentralization, you'll see those industries adopt blockchain pretty quickly because it's just a more easy platform for them to pick up and do the cryptographic things they already need to do.
And I want to jump in on a bit since I have this Jones for Estonian identity. The Estonians have done 100% digital government. Their governmental ID allows you to vote, pay your taxes, get your prescriptions. All of your interactions with the government happen with this ID. They've saved enough money on their government budget to pay for their whole military with the digitalization of their government. So their military budget is less than the savings from their digitalization. So if we digitalize the state of Washington's ID, how many people here have a Washington driver's license? If it was a Washington driver's license in digital, you could get 30% of the state budget back. So that's just, a decision away and a little bit of work.
maybe a question for Amy, since you were talking about biotech a little bit. Do you think it's possible to do an ICO where it's a percentage stake in a future drug program in a biotech company?
Yeah, I think that's a good example of a security token where you would be funding a traditional company with a non-traditional funding mechanism, which would be the securitized token of the ICO. I definitely think that that's something you could do.
And so why would you do that versus trying to go to Wall Street and get, a bank to do a Reg D? Is that a reality today, right now? Should I consider that if I want to finance a drug program, or am I going to be, has anyone done it?
Yeah, so I think that's something that we're going to start seeing in the very near future. Not a lot of people have done the securitized token way of raising money for traditional businesses. Not many people have done that, but I think we're going to see that really soon because it's a logical next step for the market. And I think the reasons for doing that would be kind of what I was talking about earlier with the traditional investment process being a private placement where you get, equity on a piece of paper that goes in a folder and it's highly illiquid. If you tokenize it, you have broader access to a more diverse set of investors. You have a more transactable asset. I think those are all good reasons for doing it via a token rather than a private placement.
So when she says securitized, there are almost a dozen different pathways to be compliant. And so I will be running a workshop on pathways to funding in April. So if you want to dive into that in specific, come find me. But the key question is, who's your audience? And is that audience that wants to have that piece of a drug thing engaged in crypto, or are they not? And that's your key question. Thank you. Yeah. So I really appreciate everyone who's been able to come. I thought that was a great conversation. We're doing this every Tuesday for a while. We have, I think, 3 more or 4 more of these left. So please look at the other dates and have a good conversation with the people around you.
We have one more thank you to our Seattle Entrepreneur Club sponsor, and she'd like to say a few words.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. This is Amy, another Amy, from Seattle Entrepreneurship Club. We are a nonprofit organization who serves the entrepreneurs in Seattle area. We are also one of the sponsors of this event. In this May, between 4th to 6th, we are going to hold a startup weekend, blockchain edition. And the Dragon Chain and New Alchemy are among the sponsors. Everyone who has interest in blockchain and would like to work with other great professionals during the weekend are welcome to register and join us. I have the information card if you have interest. I will spread this. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, that was great.